Good afternoon and welcome to a very special interview show of the Prode. Tensions in West Asia, often referred to as the Middle East, remain at an all-time high as several nations grapple with both internal as well as external conflicts. From Gaza, which is facing a severe humanitarian crisis, to the ongoing tensions between Israel, Iran, Hamas, and the significant human rights challenges occurring in Syria, a large portion of the region is in turmoil. To discuss these issues and their broader impact on India, we are joined by one of India's foremost strategic minds on West Asia, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad. Ambassador Ahmad is a former Indian ambassador to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Oman, and has written an insightful and detailed book titled West Asia at War: Repression, Resistance, and Great Power Games. The link to the book is attached in the description box below, so do check it out. Ambassador Ahmad will be sharing their insights from the book as well as drawing from their extensive diplomatic career in the region. Thank you so much, sir, for your time and a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Sir, I would like to begin the discussion by asking that you have spent decades as a diplomat in West Asia. So, what personal experiences most profoundly shaped your understanding of the region's political and social complexity, and how do those insights come through in this book? And what was your major motivation behind writing West Asia at War?
See, one of the major problems in regard to discussing West Asia, even understanding it and coming to terms with it, is the problem with the terminology that we use. We very often use two terms with regard to West Asia: Islamic world and Arab world. When we use these terms, we give a sense of a monolithic identity, something that this region broadly shares, and are therefore very surprised when we find events taking place that do not necessarily reflect these collective nouns that we use or collective descriptions that we use. We must remember that for at least 250 years, what we used to know as the Muslim world in South Asia and West Asia has ceased to exist. Indeed, it was overwhelmingly a construction of the Raj. We had three empires till about the 18th century: the Mughal Empire, the Safavid Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. This was the Muslim world, you could say, and it was very powerful in its own way and played a significant strategic role in regional and world affairs. Those countries have now been divided into at least 30 to 35 countries. A systematic policy of divide and rule by imperialist powers have left this region in a shambles. Many of the states that have emerged as a result of imperialist intervention are extremely fragile. They have very little historical justification for their existence. Large numbers of people have been deeply divided, and many issues have emerged that actually divide them on basis of faith, of sectarian identity, ethnic identity. The original idea of shaping these entities was to ensure that they would, for their security, continue to depend on the West. Remember here that the countries that emerged as a result of Western intervention were inherently fragile and were never intended to be self-sufficient in terms of their security. Recall Pakistan here, which emerged in 1947. Recall Israel here, which emerged in 1948. And recall all the countries of West Asia. Every one of them has been inherently politically fragile. The region, therefore, has been in continuous turmoil. This turmoil has been further aggravated by periodic Western interventions, with major military force utilized by these forces, by these elements. None of the issues that agitate the region have been addressed. In fact, the region has been left more seriously damaged than it was before. This is the most important point to understand about West Asia, that this is a region in turmoil. It is inherently insecure, and periodic Western interventions have broken this land even further and thoroughly damaged and impoverished its people.
So you talked about issues that are left unanswered or unresolved. So what issues exactly you are referring to?
You see, this is the creation of states, which were almost, I think, all the lines except one, all the lines that you see from the Indian border with Pakistan up to the Mediterranean, each and every line was constructed by imperialist forces, the British and the French, largely the British. Now, when these lines were constructed, they were meant to serve Western interests. None of them was meant to serve the interests of the people concerned. For example, the Sykes-Picot Agreement during the First World War was supposed to actually divided this territory among between the British and the French in West Asia and gave rise to 5 states. The original promise to the Arab people was to have one Arab state. Imagine the contours of this region if you had one Arab state. It would have been a formidable presence. And therefore, if I can give you a quick analogy without going into greater detail, imagine a scenario where you had a reunited India that emerged in 1947 instead of the truncated India that emerged at that time. It would have been a formidable strategic presence in world affairs. But look at the consequences of partition. Overwhelmingly a region that is in conflict with itself and has been unable to play a constructive role in world affairs. Now, what are these things? Not only was West Asia dividing within itself, you have the imposition of the state of Israel as a consequence of the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement is a European movement. It emerged because the Europeans grossly mistreated the Jewish people for nearly 2 millennia. At no stage do you find in Jewish history that the Jews were mistreated in Arab lands. That is where their culture flourished. That is where their learning flourished. That is where they flourished as a people. Look at the contrast with Europe. Constant mistreatment, abuse, pogroms, and finally culminating with the Holocaust. The construction, the ready support to the Zionist movement and the imposition of the Jewish people into West Asia because the Europeans could not accommodate them is an absolute travesty. It was a travesty in its time. I would say to you, frankly, that today Israel is a reality. It has a right to exist in West Asia now, but what it does not have a right to is the right to continue to have occupied territories. There is a state of Israel and there are the occupied territories. And what you really need to see in West Asia for long term peace is to have a two-state solution where you have a sovereign and credible Palestinian state and you have a Jewish state next to it, the state of Israel. You have other issues also in the region. You have, for example, Turkey. Turkey is a dissatisfied power. Its present leadership has memories of the Ottoman Empire, and they want to recover some of the glories of that empire. And they therefore also are dissatisfied with the borders that were constructed. You also have another issue which is of more recent origin, and that is the problem of Iran. Iran was a very well accepted and honored ally of the West till 1979. And then you find when they had the Islamic Revolution, largely as a consequence of what Iranians saw as a betrayal of their homeland by the Shah of Iran, as he became subservient to Western interests. When you have the revolution, you find the entire wrath of the Western world is therefore directed at Iran, at the Islamic Republic of Iran. And from that day till today, Iran has not had a moment of peace because sanctions upon sanctions have been imposed upon that country because it had the temerity to have a revolution that would be more in tune with its own culture, heritage, and demand for dignity than the Shah of Iran had been. This is another travesty that we are looking at just as we speak to each other. And the third point, let me make the Gulf countries that emerge, the 6 countries of the Gulf. If you look at them carefully, each of them is a product of the British intervention. They were given borders, they were given capitals, they were given ruling dynasties by the British, but they were never given security. It was always understood by the British that they would be dependent on the British for their security. Many of them are very tiny countries. At least three of them don't even have a national majority of their own. Expatriates constitute the majority. They are insecure states. They had very little modicum of modern day governance. And when the British got tired of looking after these statelets, they handed over the responsibility to the Americans. Today, what you find is that after several years of dependence on the Americans, there is a pervasive sense of fatigue in the Gulf countries, where they believe that the United States is no longer a credible security provider. And many of them are today speaking the language of strategic autonomy. So you find the region in an extraordinary churn, connected with the depredations of Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinians, till recently the divide between Saudi Arabia and Iran, until recently the efforts of the Turks to intrude into the neighboring territories as a kind of recovery of Ottoman glory. Some of these things are changing. You find Gulf countries asserting strategic autonomy. You find Saudi Arabia today engaged with the Iranians on the basis of arrangement put together by the Chinese. You find Turkey also becoming a little more moderate and now reaching out to Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Egypt. So you have a region in churn. And there is a great sense of uncertainty as to where things will go in the near future.
Yeah. Sir, your book highlights the recurring cycles of repression and resistance across the region. So, coming to the most pressing crisis today, and that is the war in Gaza and the immense civilian suffering. So, how do you see any realistic pathway for resolving the Palestinian question that isn't entirely shaped by great power rivalry?
See, when I spoke of repression and resistance, I saw a pattern in West Asian history. In fact, the subtitle and the introduction were written at the end of the book when I had written the rest of it. Then a pattern started emerging in my mind. And I saw that rather than view the people of West Asia, North Africa, as people who were uh, uh, sort of mute observers with regard to the depredations imposed upon them, had actually been very active in resisting imperialism, authoritarianism, and seeking constantly a political order where they could live with dignity, participate in governance, and shrug off the interventions into their politics from Western powers. This was the pattern that I saw of repression and resistance. I also concluded very sadly that this pattern has consistently shown that even though there is a certain promise in the resistance, ultimately the powers of authoritarianism and the powers of imperialism, external role players through imperialist intervention, have constantly succeeded in ensuring a political status quo. That is, power has constantly overwhelmed the desire for change that animates the vast majority of the people of the region. Now, you have asked me a specific question with regard to the Palestine-Israel issue. It is There is at one level the issue is very simple. You have two people who have lived side by side as children of Abraham for 2.5 millennia, maybe more. They are the same people. That land that they live in is called Palestine. They have never been divided amongst themselves on the basis of faith. Different faiths have come and defined different people from time to time, but the people's identity has not changed as Palestinians. So you had certain faiths which predate Judaism. You have Judaism itself, you have Christianity, and more recently, you have Islam. But the people could not have changed and have not changed. would also argue to you very strongly that even when the Romans threw out the Jewish people from their promised land, from the land in which they lived, and were sent into the diaspora, when they went to Europe, they were mistreated by the Christians as people who had participated in the execution of Jesus Christ. This did not happen in the Muslim lands. Recall the story of Spain, when the Catholics murdered a large number of Muslims and Jews, and they fled together into Muslim territories across the sea in North Africa. So you will see a very different pattern. Coming to modern times, the Zionist movement was overwhelmingly a European movement. It was a European movement because that is where the persecution took place. That is where the ghettos were located. That is where you had abuse of the Jewish people. That is where you had pogroms. And that is where you finally had the Holocaust. The inability of the Christians of Europe to accommodate their Jewish residents is the source of the Zionist movement. Zionist movement occurred in a set of circumstances. It's a complex story, well documented and well known. Large numbers of Jewish people migrated to what finally became the state of Israel, and the state of Israel was proclaimed in 1948. Certain regional states attempted to overthrow this entity, but were not successful. Today, if there is a solution, it is a solution where you have to have the same piece of land is contested by two people. These are people who share a heritage. Every Muslim reveres all the prophets of the Old Testament. In fact, Jewish story itself tells us that the Arab and the Jew are the children of Abraham, the same father but different mothers. If that is indeed the history, I would say to you that let these two people share the land today. And that is, I said, the simple approach. The simple approach. I see no difficulty with that. And there is a lot of support for this in large numbers of people, both among Palestinians as well as Jews, and including Jews who live abroad. But there is a problem, and that is what complicates the scenario. There is a very hard right wing element in Jewish discourse today that is in control of its politics. They believe their understanding of the Old Testament is extremely hard, extremely demanding, extremely exclusive. What they say is that this land of Israel is a sacred land given to the Jewish people for their exclusive use. The Jews are themselves a unique people, a chosen people by God, and this is their land. The Old Testament does not allow the Jew to share this land with non Jewish people. They indeed assert the right of annihilation on the basis of biblical support. This is where you get into complication. A reading of the Old Testament, which provides a messianic perception to the Jewish people, to sections of the Jewish people. I'm not saying every Jew has this messianic, but today those Jews are dominant. The cabinet that Netanyahu has put together is dominated by ultra nationalists and ultra religious people. There is also the third factor which we must take into account, that the Jewish people living in Israel have been led to feel insecure. That the way in which the violence that Israel has perpetrated against the Palestinians and the refusal of its leaders to engage with Palestinians towards the settlement is based on conveying to the Jewish people, you are insecure. If we were to accommodate any of these demands from our neighbors, we are going to be weakened, we will be annihilated. Look at the way we were treated historically. Never again are we going to allow this. Now, this catastrophic, this cataclysmic view of what is likely to happen to Jewish people is very deep in the psyche of several people. There is no sane, moderate voice that is influential amongst them. Most of the voices amongst the Jewish people in Israel and some of them outside are the ones who talk the language of animosity, the language of hatred and violence, and the sense that we are all of us beleaguered and insecure as evidenced by our past history. So this, as I said, the solution is at one level simple, at the other level complex. What is likely to happen? I tend to use the, the remarks of Martin Luther King when he said, I have a dream. He too was looking at a very difficult scenario in his country, the coming together of black and white people as brethren and citizens of the same land. I'm looking at the same dream. I'm looking at a scenario where large sections of Jewish people in Israel recognize the Palestinians as their brethren, accept them as people who can live side by side with them, either in a two-state solution or in a one-state solution where they can live together as brethren in one democratic state. Is this likely to happen? To So far, I have not come across any statesman or grouping that has the capacity to push this forward. Am I completely pessimistic about this? No. I believe there will be a time. I cannot accept the fact that you can construct a state like the state of Israel on the basis of such wanton violence. It is not acceptable. I don't believe that right thinking Jewish people in Israel would be comfortable with the way that their armed forces have killed large numbers of women and children. Is this what the state of Israel is about and the idealism that had supported them when they created this? I don't believe. I cannot accept the fact that you can kill 50 or 60,000 people in a year and a half, 70% of them women and children, and believe that you have secured the state of Israel. You have not.
So now coming to the external powers, and you have written extensively about the role of external powers in fueling instability, with Iran and Israel locked in what some call a regional Cold War, US backing of Israel, and Russia's growing tie with Tehran. How do you see the balance of global power evolving in the Israel-Palestine issue, and how do you analyze the role of bigger states like Russia and US in the whole scenario?
In the aftermath of the Gaza War, in fact, the Gaza War is not over because Israel continues to direct lethal assaults both in the West Bank and in Gaza and kill large numbers of people almost on daily basis. It doesn't have any viable target, so it is attacking refugee camps and hospitals and medical facilities and humanitarian support bases. It is a, it is an obnoxious scenario. It is not something that can be acceptable as something which is part of war. This is not war. This is genocide. And this is a power that is triumphant. So, what is the political scenario in the region today? Number one, Israel is triumphant. It has vanquished all its enemies and is today a supremo as far as military force is concerned. Iran and the axis of resistance have been thoroughly emasculated. The Donald Trump regime that has emerged 100 days ago has so far indicated total support for Israel. And some of the loose remarks the president made about Gaza and the Riviera of the Middle East were so insensitive and obnoxious that it indicated that the president has no clue about what is happening around him. There seems to be an effort now, and this is likely to be US policy in the coming months, that they are anxious to pick up the thread of normalization. That means Arab states normalize relations with the Israelis regardless of what the Israelis do to the Palestinians. And it appears as if their principal target in this regard is Saudi Arabia. So you are likely to see that scenario. This is the reality, the facts of life. What is likely to happen in the coming months? Every aspect is somehow shrouded in uncertainty. Number one, how will the Gaza war finally end? What will be the administration that emerges from the ceasefire when it is finally in place? What will happen at the West Bank? What will happen with regard to the Palestine Authority? The second area of uncertainty is the state of Israel itself, the state of governance. Is Netanyahu going to be prime minister for life? What about the various court cases that are against him? Do you feel that there could be inquiry about his conduct, about the preparedness of Israel? Was there any serious failure? The way he has treated some of the people who have criticized him, including his intelligence chief, suggests that he is feeling vulnerable on that score. So, a combination of the court cases which are already there for corruption and abuse of power, as well as the possible failure of the prime minister, the political failure of the prime minister in protecting Israel effectively from the October 7 attack could be a factor in domestic politics of Israel. He's not, I don't believe that he's prime minister forever. He has made very serious mistakes. He's avoiding meeting a serious inquiry and is therefore continuing the conflict as much as he can. I would also, and the third thing is, what about Iran? Iran appears seriously emasculated. Is this a scenario for further conflict? Is Israel really committed to a war? Do you think that the United States would like to go to war with the Iranians? So far, it appears that Donald Trump does not want war. Even the latest news item relating to the removal of the National Security Advisor suggests that the NSA wars had gone beyond the mandate given to him by Donald Trump because he was discussing with Netanyahu the possible attack upon Iran, which is not the policy of Donald Trump. So you have these serious uncertainties. In this scenario, where do we go? We have again one more uncertainty with regard to the United States policy. To what extent is the American president committed to, to engaging with Putin and accommodating some of Putin's demands vis-a-vis Ukraine? To what extent is the American president committed to the Western alliance? Is the Western alliance likely to survive Donald Trump's demands upon them? These are very serious areas of uncertainty. And the final area of uncertainty is what is likely to be the shape of relationship between the United States and China. What I would therefore say to you is as follows. My personal view is that for the very short term, some of the issues of uncertainty that I had mentioned to you are likely to be they will emerge in some concrete form, and we will arrive at certain conclusions based on them. But as far as the big picture is concerned, my own contribution is as follows. I believe that China is going to be a significant role player in West Asian affairs. That China, it is not going to be a military role. China has never sought a military role. On the contrary, China has seen that the military role that the United States adopted as its approach and policy has been disastrous for the Americans as well as for the region. Recall here the interventions in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in Libya. No American purpose has been served. The region has been very severely damaged. The Chinese talk the language of economic cooperation, of economic development, of logistical development, and of technological cooperation. This is the language that appeals to the region. No one in the region wants to be part of a new Cold War. Therefore, I would say the following is likely. While the Americans and the Chinese will compete with each other at the global level and at various theaters, very likely there will be no military conflict. There will be competitions which are political in character, diplomatic in character, economic and technological. But I doubt there will be a major military confrontation. Similarly, I will say that there will be a certain American rivalry with China as far as West Asia is concerned. And the countries in West Asia are likely to convey to both China and to the United States that they are not interested in a new Cold War. They are not interested in becoming allies of one side or the other. They would like to work with both of them. What you will therefore see in the language of international affairs, the assertion of influence and interest by so called middle powers. This is the main lesson that is emerging, that yes, they are China and United States are influential, but neither of them has the monopoly on power or influence. There is a large number of states now emerging: Japan, Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, India, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel. They are likely to be players in the region. Some of them may use the language of being pro US. But I would say to you that neither Japan nor Korea, and certainly not Australia, are looking at a military confrontation with China or anyone else. Middle powers want to focus on economic development. That is the challenge. All the elections that you have seen and the latest result that you have seen in Australia, nobody is talking the language of military cooperation, of military confrontation. They are talking the language of economic development, and that is where China scores. So I would say to you that I expect China to be a major role player in the region.
So, the coming to the Abraham Accords and India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, and wider normalization efforts that have signaled a new era of cooperation. But with recent escalations, that optimism also seems shaken. So, are we witnessing the collapse of this vision, or just a tactical pause in a longer strategic shift? Because you talked about economic cooperation and you talked about how middle powers are mostly interested in some sort of an economic outlook rather than a military confrontation.
Given the importance you have attached to the limited normalization that occurred between certain Arab states and Israel in August 2020, which is glorified with the term Abraham Accords, I would like to share some views with you. It is a travesty to refer to those agreements named after a holy prophet of the Old Testament. Prophet Abraham had absolutely nothing to do with those agreements. They were political agreements in a very specific political and diplomatic context. They were meant to serve the national interest of the countries concerned. They were deliberately aimed at ensuring that Palestinian interests are not served, but that normalization with certain Arab countries takes place. The principal country that succumbed to these blandishments was the UAE. The UAE, I believe, is a very important country economically. It is a regional trade hub. It is a leisure center. It is a financial center. And it is hoping to become a technological hub in the region. By no stretch of imagination can you refer to the UAE as a principal strategic role player in the region. It has a population of 7 million, of which Emiratis are just 1 million. It normalized ties with Israel because it wanted to ingratiate itself with the Americans and with the Jewish lobby that you have in the United States, regardless of the electoral outcome. It is a small country. It wants to have a certain role in regional and world affairs that goes beyond its size. And it is something that is laudable to become the technological hub. But do not believe that there was any fundamental change in West Asia as a result of UAE normalizing ties. The other countries that came on board were Bahrain, which is even smaller. Bahrain, both these countries have non-local people as the majority population. In fact, between you and me, Indians. The other was Morocco. Morocco did not normalize fully. It was anxious to have tourism between Israel and Morocco, and therefore they normalized to some extent, but did not exchange ambassadors. The last country was Sudan, which is engulfed in a civil conflict and the normalization has gone nowhere. The Saudis, the Americans were very anxious that the Saudis should come on board and that they believed that getting the most important Arab and Islamic country would be the final achievement as far as the rehabilitation of Israel in West Asia is concerned. That has not happened so far. They wanted to achieve this by displaying to anyone who wished to see that you can rehabilitate Israel in West Asia and normalize its presence in West Asia without addressing the needs of the Palestinian people. I don't believe, as a result of the Gaza war, I don't believe that this is now a feasible prospect. The Americans haven't given up. You still have news reports constantly speaking of the Americans offering a security pact to Saudi Arabia, accommodating Saudi Arabia's interest in a civilian nuclear program, also signing an agreement, security agreement with Saudi Arabia and giving them the latest weaponry. We have a very long way to go. I would be personally very surprised if the Saudis came forward on this ground, on this basis. I want to also emphasize one more point to you, and that is there is a deep gap, indeed an abyss, between the views of certain Arab leaders and their population. Successive surveys have shown all through the past several months that the 90 to 98% of Arab people are intensely supportive of the Palestinian aspirations and very harshly critical of normalization. So I'm not going to pretend to you this is going to happen in the near future. Now, the other aspect which you mentioned, the other project that you mentioned was again a thoroughly misguided American effort to rehabilitate, to bring Israel back into West Asia and make its presence normal. And this is the so-called IMEC. IMEC is supposed to, on theory, when you read the literature, it is at best laughable. Goods from India are supposed to go to ports in UAE. There they are unloaded and put onto trains. The trains chug all over the Arabian Peninsula and reach Haifa, the Israeli port of Haifa, where they are once again loaded onto ships and taken to Europe. This is an idiotic proposal. It has no basis in reality. There is no railway system. And may I also say, one doesn't have to be very naive. One has to be very naive to believe that you can have a railway system across border where you do not have good relations. There have been railway systems in the past. When the Ottomans were ruling this region, you had a railway system connecting many of the countries, many of the capitals of this region and the cities of this region during the Ottoman Empire. In fact, Haifa was connected. Jerusalem, Istanbul, Haifa, Damascus, many ports were connected with each other by railway. Why did that project collapse? Because of the absence of camaraderie between neighboring countries. We do not have those railway systems just yet. I therefore don't see any prospect of IMEC going anywhere in the near future. I have a simple solution. If the Israelis want to be an integral part of West Asia and see their security in terms of good relations with the region to which they have chosen to belong, accommodate Palestinian interests. The one thing you should do, which is staring at you in the face, you don't want to do, but want to go over all over the world. I once told a Jewish diplomat that you are willing to send your emissaries to all the capitals. You send them to Abu Dhabi, you send them to Riyadh, and you meet somebody. You send them to Cairo. They are all. You send them 1,500 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers away. You won't go 5 kilometers from Jerusalem to Ramallah. And you can solve, you should address Palestinian issues which are right next door to you rather than go 2,000 kilometers to these far off capitals in the desperate hope that somehow you will normalize with them. You can never normalize with the people of the land so long as you do not accommodate the Palestinian cause. and Palestinian aspiration. It's as simple as that. It is staring at you in the face, but because it doesn't suit the ultra nationalists in Israel and the ultra religious people, they pretend that they have other avenues available to them.
Coming to the role of India, India has skillfully maintained good bilateral relations across ideological and geopolitical divides from Israel and Iran to Palestine, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. So, in your view, how could India recalibrate its West Asia strategy in light of the region's deepening volatility and shifting alliances?
Is the thing about India. The policies that we have today are the policies that have been in place for more than 30 years, 30 to 40 years. And these policies are to have very substantial bilateral relations with every country of the region for mutual advantage, which meant not getting involved with the politics of the region, but build up relationships separately with each region so that the relationship that India had with Israel did not impinge on the ties we had with Iran, did not impinge on the ties we had with Saudi Arabia, nor did they affect the ties we had with the UAE. This was a very useful approach, and it worked. At a time when the United States was the dominant role player in the region and indeed did not allow any other role player, you had this made sense. The Americans later on, as they started making mistakes and they got fatigued, they started referring to countries like India and China as free riders. Actually, this was unfair because we were not free riders. We were simply not allowed to play a role. Since then, the situation has changed. The Americans have lost credibility. The region has become even more insecure. There are constant fears of a major region wide conflagration. People like me have argued that this bilateral approach to the region of building up relations with individual countries separately, but not having a regional perspective, a perspective relating to regional security, no longer serves India's interests. And from 2012, 2013, I have been arguing that India should now give up this approach of having bilateral ties, but and come up with a more effective regional perspective. This has not happened. From 2011, 2012, when people like me started talking this language, our argument was very simple, and let me set it out for you. The US has lost credibility. The region is looking for someone who could play a more effective role in regional affairs. The region itself appeared at that time incapable of solving its own disputes. We were particularly concerned about the Saudi Iran divide. At that time, the Palestine issue had not become as violent as it has become now. There were many other issues which were agitating us: the conflict in Yemen, the conflict in Syria, and the Saudi Iran divide. Also, the intrusions of Turkey into Iraq and in Syria. So, you had a desire, a desperate desire on the part of the region, wanting someone who could play a diplomatic role. And I believe that. Now, what was our interest? Energy security. 80% of our oil comes from this region. Trade, they are major trade partners for us. Logistical connectivity projects are talked about. We have, in those days, we had about 7 to 8 million people. We are concerned about the security of these people. If you had a conflict, theoretically, you had a conflict, a major conflict in the region, would not several thousand Indians be very badly wounded, if not killed, in these conflicts? Did not. So, all of these factors, to my mind, made it very clear that India cannot afford to sit on the sidelines and not play a role. Unfortunately, these points that we made fell into deaf ears, both earlier of the Manmohan Singh government and later of the Modi government. What we had instead was a pursuit of bilateral relations. With the Modi regime, it has been extraordinarily successful. And we have very close ties. And in fact, the ties have developed and have become very, in terms of content, extremely have a very substantial strategic value. But do recall, all of these relationships are bilateral. Now, what happened is when you have an opportunity, other countries don't sit back. The Chinese have had a regional perspective for the last 10 years. They first brought in the Belt and Road Initiative, which linked Chinese interests all across the region, including through West Asia. Then you had the Chinese dialogue platforms, first with the GCC and with the Arab League. The Chinese scholars started writing about quasi mediation diplomacy, in terms of which China would be playing a role to bring together countries that were divided, encouraging dialogue between them, but making itself available if there were differences. And lo and behold, you have the March 2023 agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran in Beijing. So the rapprochement between that is was our place. That is the role we should have played. That region was ready for it. The region, every joint statement that you read that a prime minister concluded speaks of the very high respect they have for India. When we have been engaging with this region for 4,000 years, in 2012, I approached a Chinese scholar and told him that, look, why don't we work together and bring peace to this region? He said, I will come on board, but it will have to be led by India. India knows this region for 5,000 years. China knows this region for 5 years. You take the lead and we will follow you. This was the situation in 2012. And look at how they realized there is no one else coming in. They could not afford to have the region collapsing into conflict, and therefore they constructed a diplomatic structure within which they could become active, and that is quasi mediation diplomacy. They are going slow, low key. They have no Chinese diplomat has pretended that he has a magic wand as far as the Palestine issue is concerned. It may happen later. I don't know, because the Israelis function completely under as a result of the support given to them by the Americans, and therefore they are so far have not looked elsewhere beyond the United States. But as of now, the central role player in the region is China in terms of diplomacy. In terms of diplomacy, it is the major. Now, where does this leave India? India continues to enjoy very high respect and regard all across the region. Do recall just a few days ago, our Prime Minister visited Saudi Arabia, and it was a visit that was very substantial. All the joint statements speak of a strategic partnership, some of them of a comprehensive strategic partnership, but there is no evidence whatsoever that India wants to translate these crucial interests and the goodwill that we have and the opportunity that is available into something broader and larger.
Yeah, now coming to the situation in Syria, which also happens to be an important flashpoint in West Asia. So, we have seen the fall of Bashar regimes, and the newly formed Syrian transitional government also faced constant criticism for human rights abuses against the minorities. And just 2 hours ago, the Telegraph have reported that Israel has sent troops into southern Syria. So, in order to protect the Druze minority as it fighters clash with the pro-government militia. So, how do you see the situation in Syria unfolding, and what broader impacts will it have on the broader situation in the West Asia?
Israel's principle. There are two things here. One is, how did we reach the present scenario when an acknowledged jihadi leader becomes the president of Syria and is accepted by the rest of the region? That is one part. And the second part is the Israeli role after the president has taken over. The as the situation relating to Russia and Iran deteriorated, one due to the focus on Ukraine and the other due to the encounters with Israel, Iran found itself more and more, Syria found itself more and more isolated. I think We don't have the full story, but I believe, and I have believed from the very beginning, that Turkey played the lead role in overthrowing Bashar Assad and installing Ahmad Ashara in the presidential palace. Turkey has, it is part of their Ottoman dream to expand their role in the region, recover the territories that were part of the Ottoman Empire. They were, they got the Americans on board because the Americans were happy to see that to some extent the Russian influence in Syria would be diminished. And the Israelis and Americans were both happy that Iran would find itself on a losing wicket as far as Syria is concerned. And indeed, they had to withdraw their elements, their forces entirely. So, this is a Turkish initiative. And they have put in place of Bashar Assad, who fled. There are many factors which will be looked at. I would ask one of the questions which have been asked: why did the Syrian army not fight? I think the message the Syrian army got was that this is a losing wicket. There is no future. If the Russians are not there to protect Bashar Assad, if the Iranians are not there to Bashar Assad, why should we take bullets on behalf of a president who has lost it all? So they saw no advantage. It is something like, if I may give you a parallel, as the Americans were leaving Afghanistan, they were leaving Kabul, the Afghan armed forces saw no reason to be protecting their president because he was on a losing wicket. Soldiers will fight in something they believe in. Here there was nothing to believe in. The person himself was packing, Ghani was packing his bags and running away. The Americans, once they saw the Americans are going away, they saw no advantage in fighting. Exactly the same thing happened in Syria. So you have Ahmad Ashara. Ahmad Ashara has tried to, uh, he has been accepted across the region. He has visited some of the major capitals. Some of the foreign ministers have visited. And more or less, he has been accepted as the legitimate president of Syria. The other thing that is happening is almost on a daily basis, you find the Israelis hitting targets in Syria. And that makes very little sense because there is no Syrian threat to Israel. There is no, it's a broken country. It has been subject to civil conflict from 2011. None of those issues have ever been resolved, whether it pertains to the Kurds or to the Alawi, the sectarian divide, the ethnic divide, and the divide relating to Druze. Various conflicts occur from time to time. The region, the country is awash with huge quantities of weapons, just like Afghanistan. Syria, Israel is using this. Don't at all believe anything about being the protector of Druze or anybody like that. That's absolute rubbish. What the Israelis are interested in is to deliver such a series of hammer blows on Syria that it becomes a broken country. It has already been broken to a great extent by the civil conflicts, but it should never be sewn back. If you remember, this was the approach of the Americans in Iraq. Break the country so that it's never healed again, never put together again. The Israeli approach, which the Americans support, is that any country that shows, that does not accept Israel's agenda in the region should be thoroughly emasculated and broken. Iraq was one of them, and Libya was the other. And you are aware, both of them have been absolutely destroyed. Syria is the third such country. And what you are looking at today is a repeat of what the Americans did in Iraq. You remember what all, here they are talking about the Druze, there the Americans had talked about weapons of mass destruction and chemical weapons. They had done 1,000 inspections in Iraq and had never found any evidence of that. But they wanted to break Iraq once and forever so that it would not ever emerge as a threat to the Israelis. That is the Israeli approach, that not only should Israel be very strong, any potential enemy of the Israelis should be broken. What is likely to happen in Syria? I am not sure Syria can recover from these hammer blows. One is that it will be militarily completely emasculated. I would also not be surprised if it loses territory. The Israelis have already occupied large parts of the Golan Heights. They have occupied it before from the 67 war, but they've gone ahead now. They have also sent troops into southern Syria. This is, I think, that they may, through their military presence, ensure that Syria does not recover from these hammer blows for several years to come. If you look at the pattern of Iraq, you will find Americans attack Iraq in 2003. It takes nearly 20 years for that country to be put together. And even today, many of its issues have not been resolved. Its economy is still in a very weak wicket, but at least it has a petroleum. Syria does not have any of that. It depends on tourism. So you are going to see a very serious basket case. May I make one observation which is of a general character? This, to my mind, is the lowest point of the Arab people. The Arab people, since the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the fall of Arab dynasties, have been absolutely leading a pathetic existence. The imposition of various politics that has emerged in the region has been to their serious disadvantage as a people. Many of their regimes have been co-opted and to become a part of the agenda of the Americans, Western allies, and the Israelis themselves. I don't see any way out for them. This is what you are seeing is it is a nadir. Is this the final word? No. I think the Israelis today, for Netanyahu, continued conflict is crucial for his well-being. He cannot afford to have a ceasefire because the minute there is a ceasefire, knives will come out to demand about his corruption cases as well as the ways in which he handled um, the political issues, which allowed the Israelis to take their eyes off Hamas and allowed that particular attack to take place. So he's going to be under pressure. For the time being, I am not looking at Netanyahu being either accommodative or going for a ceasefire. Look at the way he's behaving. He has a free hand from the Americans. He can go wherever he wishes, perpetrate any violence that he wishes, and the Americans will accommodate him, whether it was Biden earlier or it is Donald Trump in the present state. There is now a discussion as to where President Trump may go forward. There is one article which says that possibly Donald Trump has given Netanyahu 2 weeks. That between that when he lands in Riyadh, no more fighting. You must then talk the language of some kind of settlement. We don't know, and I'm not sure that this is part of the agenda. But you see this confirmed to some extent by almost daily barrage of weaponry and bombardment upon the Palestinian people as well as on the West Bank. What Netanyahu will then demand? It seems to me that he wants to create a scenario before Donald Trump reaches Riyadh, create a scenario where Gaza is uninhabitable, it cannot be lived in, it cannot sustain human presence. The people of West Bank will be so beleaguered that the West Bank will be ready for co-option. It will be absorbed. And there will be a pressure upon the West Bank people to find other homes. So recovery of the old plan, a revival of the old plan to send the people of Gaza into Sinai and the people of the West Bank into Jordan is likely to be something that could happen in the near future as part of the Israeli agenda with the full support of the American president.
So I would like to conclude the discussion by asking that looking ahead as new diplomatic alignments form and old conflicts still persists, what gives you hope for West Asia's future? And what should the international community, especially rising powers like India and China, focus on to contribute meaningfully to the peace, stability, and inclusive development in the region?
You see, you have in West Asia the phenomenon of Israel. Israel is a very unique country. It claims its it bases its claims to the land and supports its policies on the basis that it experienced the Holocaust. The Holocaust, the experience of the Holocaust, has ensured that there is no Western power that has the capacity or can muster that has any authority or courage to tell Israel enough. What you are doing is wrong. Because Holocaust is used by Israel as the sanction for their violence and depredations as far as the Palestinian people are concerned. You can have a very different scenario. You must anticipate a scenario in Israel where Israel can no longer blackmail the European people and the American people and say that the Holocaust gives me the sanction to kill, to carry out the most vile violence that you can see today. No other country in the world has this kind of capacity that Israel enjoys because of the Holocaust. So this is a most important aspect. The Israelis function on the basis of support of just one country and one country alone, and that is the United States. No other country matters. No other country has any influence in Tel Aviv today. It's only the United States. And the Israelis have ensured that their influence over the political establishment in Israel, in the United States, is so firm, so deep, so intense that no American politician, president, senator, congressman, journalist, business person, any one of them has the courage to say in public, Israel is wrong. Because he is then abused as anti Semitic, and you have seen the treatment many of them are experiencing at the hands of the Trump administration. Therefore, if you are looking at a change scenario, you will need to see a changed Israel. This Israel is incapable of changing. You will need a new Israel, a new generation of young people who can say the Holocaust happened in a historical context. It was one of the worst experiences that humankind could have experienced, could have put up with. But it happened in a context, and that context is now 80 years old. Many Western powers were culpable in that regard. Not one country, but several of them. Things have changed today. All of us have moved on. So I am looking forward to that Israeli generation that finally says to us in public that the Holocaust is now part of history. Once you have that, I can see absolute peace all across West Asia, from Iran up to the Mediterranean. There are no real roots for conflict. Separately, even the issue of Israel, of Iran, it is the Israelis who have persuaded the Americans that Iran is building the nuclear weapon, that it threatens Israel, that it could do this or that. It's a security threat. It supports extremism. All that whole negative agenda vis-a-vis Iran has been shaped and pursued by Israel. I see no real problem in this. But the Americans will need to also change, that they will need to muster the courage at some stage and tell the Israelis that, look, you've had your day, you are not threatened as a people. Anti Semitism is not a weapon against you. In fact, if I may say to you very honestly, if there is any anti Semitism against vis a vis the Jewish people or with Israel, it's from the extreme right in the European countries and in the extreme right from the United States. So this is the reality. And you have seen the rise of the right wing. The rise of the right wing is dangerous. It is not helping Israel's cause. The extreme right wing in the Western countries echo the right wing of the earlier decade that finally led to the rise of Nazism in Germany and a very strong support base for Nazi agenda in different parts of Europe and the United States. So it's not as if we have forgotten history, it's there in front of us. I would therefore say that look, Holocaust is part of history. Let the Americans, let the Israelis move forward. And if Israel needs to be a part of West Asia, let it reach out as a friend to all of those people who now people West Asia and who see themselves as children of Abraham. And starting with the Palestinians, how many people are you going to kill? And you keep on killing and you keep on killing and you keep on killing. This has this is not credible, it is not acceptable, and I believe it is not sustainable.
Ambassador Ahmad, thank you so much for sharing such rich insights drawn from both your diplomatic career and critical themes explored in your book West Asia at War. For those tuning in, the link to West Asia at War is in description box below. I encourage you to read it, reflect on it, and continue engaging with the complexities of this ever-evolving region. Thank you so much, sir, once again for your time. It has been an honor speaking to you.
My pleasure. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.